This is the Korean edition.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't it like whacked out? It's like totally. Yeah. It's a hardcover.
Wow, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, and Korean is just such a cool looking language too. It's trying to find a place that's really where it really shows off. It's that really crazy, like these crazy symbols. It's just so boss. So it's fun.
But trying to track them down, I always get like really irritated about that. Like if you published an edition of my book, I'm not going to see any royalties from this. Can you at least send me a copy of it that I can have?
Right, exactly.
I've never gotten foreign royalties. Like
really?
Yeah, no, never, man. Like I get like some of the advance money, but then like that's all I ever see. Like and Fonte Bukowski's in 7 languages at this point, and I don't know. I don't know how they're selling. Probably not very well. That's probably why. But.
I don't know. I saw that all over the place when I was in Angoulême.
Yeah, you saw them there sitting on shelves in bookstores. That's why not in anybody's home.
Well, I don't know about that. I think you do okay.
So you probably had a whole bunch of touring stuff that got canceled.
Oh, shit. Yeah, like 40 dates.
Oh, shit. Dude.
3 or 4 trips to Europe.
Yeah.
Like 15, 16 festivals. Went like that.
I get really I get nervous on overseas flights. You're over that though, right? You don't care anymore?
No, I don't care.
Do you take anything on the plane to pass out?
No, I just I make them. I'm like become such a prima donna that I make them give me like the seat with the extra leg room.
Oh, nice.
So I can, well, I'm tall. I mean, I'm 6'3", so
yeah.
So I can stretch out and I put on some music and try to get some sleep. It's pretty automatic now,
You watch movies?
So many times. Yeah, whatever's on.
Planes always show, like, whatever the latest Woody Allen movie is. It's like they have it on the plane. I don't know what that's about. It's like the only place you can even see, like, whatever
Depends on the carrier, I think.
Yeah. I just, like, watch the little map and I see, like, where the plane
is.
You
can't watch the map. You can't watch the map. Because it'll be like, man, been on this plane forever and I'm only halfway there.
Yeah.
Can't watch.
Like as soon as we get from like on the way back, because all I want to do is like get home by the end of it, and I'm just like watching. As soon as we get to like over our continent, up like way up north in Canada, and then it just like goes down the coast. Mm-hmm. I start to feel like secure, even though it's still like another 8 hours before I get home. And like I'm in South Carolina, so like the flight won't even, it goes over South Carolina and lands in Atlanta. Yeah. So I just have to like look out the window and that's where I'm supposed to be right there. I'm sure that's home.
You take like a biplane back to North Carolina.
Exactly. The spirit of St. Louis, like on its own. Contact.
Yeah.
So do you think it would be wise for them to cancel Angoulême coming up in January? Or do you think
I don't think there's any doubt they're going to cancel Angoulême now.
Damn.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, it sucks. It's total. And, I was supposed to have his book come out. And that's, all kind of down the tubes. It's been delayed until September now. But my whole tour, I mean, I know this is small potatoes compared to what's, going on.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, you're allowed to. I mean, I want to hear about it.
This is a comics thing, so we're allowed to upset these things. But, you spend 4 years working on a book and you have this planned, to hit the road and publish it. And I think it was a pretty good book and I think it was going to do well. And then this thing hits and it's like all out the door.
Yeah, well, that was the problem is that like what the thing that sucks for you is that it was supposed to come out on the anniversary.
Right.
But the thing that's good about it is that I have a copy of it, so I don't.
Oh, do you? Oh, there you go. Well, I actually have the real thing. I mean,
it's so beautiful. That back cover that they just showed. It's great.
Look at the size of that. I mean, I got this in the mail. This is the hardback, and it's like, I just like, man, I mean, it's a substantial book. It's like, God damn, no wonder I was so tired when I finished this thing.
But that is amazing though, because I always think, almost everything I've ever had published, I've like serialized as I was doing it. except for the book I'm working on now, like the big Joseph Smith book. So like
one that's taking you like 10 years to finish.
I know, but it's gonna feel so satisfying to have a big chunk of work that nobody's seen before.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like
yeah.
I'm really looking forward to that. Just being like,
yeah,
like you said, like,
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah,
how many pages is that going to be?
Probably 300. I think is what I'm gonna get to now.
This is I think 280.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So close, but it's a lot bigger than that. I mean, my Friend Dahmer is substantially smaller.
Yeah.
So I made him make it bigger because I wanted to do some drawing.
Yeah, but actually, I think this is a denser book than my Friend Dahmer too.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, my Friend Dahmer was like 4x4, the panel grid.
Yeah.
Where this one is, it's 3 rows of whatever.
Yeah, and lots of stuff to read. Like it actually takes a long. This is actually like reading a novel.
Thanks.
Yeah. But I actually worry about that because the Joseph Smith book, I'm like, this is so I packed so much. Like this is like 14 years worth of time, that I have to cram into this many pages. So it's really dense. And so I wonder, like, which of my friends are actually going to read this and which are actually just going to lie to me and said they read it. And then
I'll read it. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it'll be awesome. I'm part Mormon,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my grandmother's family was Mormon.
No shit. Really going back or what? Like
what?
Going back to like the 19th century?
Yeah.
Kidding. Did you feel that Kent State was going to be good?
Yeah.
Did you know that it was the best thing you ever did?
Well, you kind of think that about every book you do.
Hopefully.
I mean, I don't know that anything will ever, in terms of impact, will top my Friend Dahmer, just because it was so unique. And, but I think that in terms of craftsmanship and storytelling and artwork, that this is definitely my best work. I think, I try to get a little better with each book because, despite looking like this grizzled old warhorse, I've only been doing books for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So I'm actually, as far as, graphic novels go, I'm a pretty young, quote unquote, young creator. So, and there's a big learning curve there too, coming from newspaper strips like I did to longer form stories. There was a lot more to figure out than I thought there would be. And so, yeah, I mean, I try to get a little more polished with each book. And the next one's, I'll probably start moving into full color after this. So,
do you have an idea for the next one already?
No.
Okay.
I got a couple that I'm kicking around, but I'm having a lot of trouble conceptualizing right now.
So didn't you go to school for journalism?
Mm-hmm.
Was that? I mean, I imagine that was helpful for Kent State. These are all questions. That's a question you're probably going to get a lot, by the way.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was. I mean, as from the copy. Actually, the copy you have, the finished copy has even more. It's got 25 pages of footnotes in the back.
Oh wow, yeah.
So everything is sourced, and I did all this digging and interviews, and that was all my journal training. No, I did. Actually, I was actually just going through the doing my archives for the Lantern. That's the paper I started at, the Ohio State Lantern.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. That's where I started doing cartoons. So this is where I was first published. I don't know if I'm in this one. If I am, it's probably a really shitty cartoon. Yeah.
What year was that from?
This is 81.
Wow, holy shit.
So I was like 21 years old or something like that. Yeah, I've been doing all
that stuff, Derf.
Oh, God, man. I mean, the pile that is here is literally 3 feet high of these things. Because but look at the size of this paper, man. It was awesome.
Yeah.
It came out 5 days a week, and it was packed with cartoons. It was just like all this stuff that, I mean, Jeff Smith started here. he started doing Bone in this paper.
Oh.
At the same time that I was, there's one of my year in review things.
Oh, cool.
But it was awesome because, they printed 35,000 copies of this paper because Ohio State was 50,000 students. So, I had this huge audience, and I don't know where the chutzpah came for me to just walk in off the street and say, hey, I want to be a cartoonist, and then suddenly just start drawing on these shitty cartoons out there in front of 35,000 of my peers, and I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
At age 21 or 20, whenever I started, but I guess I don't know. I'm grateful it did, but I guess I didn't think about it too much. But it was an amazing experience, and that's the first time you're published. When was the first time you were published? Do you remember?
Yeah. So I was a newspaper cartoonist too. But the first comic I ever had published was in one called the Denver Daily News, and it was like the Rockies were like kicking ass that year, and they just wanted me to do like a little comic about the Rockies. So I did one. And I don't even remember what it was. Just like it was like basically 4 panels, like 4 little gags about the Rockies. And then I did the same. I walked into Westward and pitched the idea of doing like a music comic strip there, and they let me. And I did that for 7 years. I still have all of them. Every single week I clipped them out and put them in a scrapbook. So I have every single week for 7 years all piled up.
Yeah, I have I have at least one clip from every strip I did for 20 some years. So
yeah. I would read The City in Westward.
I was in that for years. Yeah.
And but I first read about you when I was a teenager. My mom for some reason bought that book, Cartoonist with Attitude or something like that. The one that
yeah.
You had like a profile in there. An interview. Yeah. So I remember I was a teenager and I read that. And that was my first. And then when I went to the comic shop, I saw the self-published version of My Friend Dahmer and Trashed.
Well, you had a good comic shop.
Yeah, it's great. It was a great shop, man.
Really?
Yeah, it was awesome. I'm sure it's gone now. It was actually it might be. It was called All in a Dream, and it was in Denver. It used to be a Mile High Comics, but it was one of those shops where you walk in and they have like shag carpet on the floor that's worn through. And you can see like the floorboards underneath it, and just like those like picnic tables that are just like full of long boxes,
Yeah.
It was such a blast. I love that place.
Yeah.
And they had like Arrows comics there. They had like a whole display that said you must be 18 years old to look at this shelf. Like porno and like manga and stuff.
I think that kept Fantagraphics going for about 20 years. Arrows comics, didn't it?
Yeah.
That was Fanta, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Fanta. And they might have to bring it back. So.
Yeah. Who knows? Moving forward. Yeah.
New comics.
Porn sell.
Yeah.
Porn sell. I think NBM had a porno offshoot too, didn't they? I forget the name of it now.
I would be surprised if they didn't still. I mean, the NBM is a really weird publisher because they don't have an identity, like a strong identity as a publisher.
They're still around though.
I know, but it's like, everybody knows like. What kind of books Drawn and Quarterly is going to publish. Like, what kind of books Fantagraphics would publish and Top Shelf and stuff. Like NBM, you're like, I don't know. Like, kind of, I guess, they're all over the place. Like, they do kind of weird European reprints, but like, not even like European artists of like a specific genre or like look. It's just kind of all over the map.
I haven't seen an NBM book in a while, so I don't really know what they're publishing, honestly.
This is that book I brought back from France, the Futuropolis one that Amy translated for me.
Oh, wow.
So she like hand cut out.
Hey, yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, that's awesome.
So now I can read it.
A lot of work.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a Christmas present, so she was sitting there working on it at work.
What a great Christmas present.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about it. Because you're not going to get the history of that company, and like nobody's going to translate that book.
No.
But it's like I still want to know about it, so.
I don't. There's probably 80% of the good French stuff has not been translated. I mean, it just exists there, and that's enough for them.
Oh my God, those are all French.
Well, a lot of I always go for the Moebius,
Sure.
and I get like I think I've got every version of Airtight Garage that's ever been published. But got a bunch of other stuff, but yeah, it's hard to I mean, they're just such gorgeous books that it's like, oh yeah, I want that. I don't care if it weighs 40 pounds.
Yeah. Doesn't it seem like it took a long time for them to publish Moebius in English?
Well, no, I mean, he was my first exposure to French comics in heavy metal back in the 70s.
Yeah, but like collections of his work, like I just felt like when I worked at Kilgore Books, every once in a while, like some copy, I think it was like a Eclipse maybe or something, published them like in the 80s.
Eclipse did and Marvel did. Wait a minute, I got some of them. Yeah, Marvel published these.
Yeah, I would see those at Kilgore, but they would be really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I have had these for probably since they were published. And they've got these like crazy real pastel color, but Moebius himself oversaw the coloring, so I guess that's what he wanted.
Wow.
But yeah, they're great. These are nice. I can't believe Marvel put these out. I mean, that's
I know, right?
Pretty daring for Marvel at any time, but it's got full frontal nudity and the whole, of course this thing, that great one.
Was that the 80s?
This was the 80s, yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing.
Yeah, incredible.
So I like him. I like Tardy. He was he's a big favorite of mine that I knew from heavy metal and a couple others, Goulet and a couple of the others. But there's so many that I didn't know, and there's so many new guys, not just in France, all over Europe, who are just doing this amazing work. And it's like, whoa, jeez. Yeah. It's a good time to be a comics fan.
Have you met Tardy before?
I have not met Tardy. He was at Angoulême one year, but I didn't run into him. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about meeting, like people I grew up reading and really admired because, I'd rather they just remain kind of an abstract. It's not always true, but
yeah,
I've gotten to know Bill Griffith, and he's just a super sweet guy, and just.
Oh yeah, this guy right here.
Yep. Young Lust. I got a few of those too. So
this is the color issue. It's pretty amazing. I'm like, well, how do they color that? Was that like they had to hand cut with like razor blades, all these like acetate sheets or something?
That's a good question. Yeah, they probably had that. It looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Could have been a crazy system like Corbin used to color, where he used airbrush and did like separations and somehow figured out a mix. And I mean, there's all kinds of wacko ways to do that. I mean, I started out cutting color, so I mean, I'm old enough that I was just before the digital revolution, so I got a taste of that.
How was it done? Was it done with like Zipatone layers on the separate sheet?
Sometimes, or acid. You had Rubylith, which was that opaque film.
Mm-hmm.
Cut out what you didn't need, and you'd leave this mask, and then they'd shoot it with a halftone. It was a nightmare.
Yeah,
I'd always fuck it up, and you'd pick up the paper the next day, and like you'd have someone with a green face or something, and oh god damn it. But yeah, I don't miss those days too much. And then you'd have like pieces of the Rubylith or the Zipatone stuck to you in various places for like a week and a half or months.
When I think back on that, I'm like, oh, it'd been so cool to be a cartoonist back in the days when you made a lot of money and it was like a real career and stuff. But then I'm like, I wouldn't have been able to get hired by anybody, and I would have been terrible. I would have just been super sloppy with my coloring and stuff.
Well, I got hired. I mean, I don't sell yourself short. I mean, there were.
Yeah, but you got hired at the tail end when it had just ended being a career, basically. I mean, you were like.
Oh, wait a minute! Honestly, I've always made a living in comics. So right from the beginning. And
well, how much did newspapers pay? Did every paper pay a different price for a strip?
Oh, the weekly stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone paid, they paid, I think when I started out, the average price was probably $25 a week. But, I topped out at 75 papers. So, do the math.
Yeah, and that was in the 80s or the
It was
80s
in
or
the
90s.
90s. That was in the 90s, yeah.
So
And then I was doing freelance, and I was doing, covers and whatever else I could, illustration and all kinds of stuff, because it was only a weekly strip, so I had lots of time.
were you self-syndicated?
Yeah.
Shit,
Yep.
man. So you had
So
to
I was making really good money in the 90s. And in the 80s, when I was a staff cartoonist for newspapers, I was making really good money. So, yeah, I've always made money in comics, always.
Yeah, Westward paid me $75 a week to do my comic strip.
Right.
Which was good. Well, I mean, I worked at like a Panera Bread the rest of the time. So it was just like $75 was just like seemed great because my paycheck every week from Panera Bread would be like $400.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was really making no fucking money. I can't believe it. And like $75 was a lot of fucking money at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, the key was you had to do it once and sell it as many times as you could. The same thing. So, I mean, that's how it's been done since, Mutton Death, I mean, that's always been the formula. That's hard to do now because all those outlets for publishing your work are gone. So that doesn't work anymore. So it's kind of useless advice. It's just historical.
Right. But when I started doing my newspaper strip, it was 2007. And it was like already the end. It was like already everybody was just talking about, this is it for newspapers. This is it. And so like every week when I'd send my strip, I'd be like waiting for like an email back immediately saying like, hey, thanks a lot, but we're not going to do this anymore.
Right. For us, launching a book for the next few years is going to be an entirely different thing. I mean, it's going to be a whole, we can't do what we were doing before, which, you had kind of this whole system. Your book came out, you did a bunch of interviews, you went to a bunch of festivals, you did a few key signings in the U.S. because signings in the U.S. are always pretty lame.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Yeah.
And you do some book festivals and comics festivals, and then maybe a couple trips abroad, and you just keep hoping it keeps building and building and building. Well, all that stuff is, how are we going to do it now?
It's all virtual now, I think.
All virtual for a while, yeah. Which is a whole different thing.
I think there will be bookstores though. I think even if bookstores close down, it would only be like a temporary thing before somebody starts up another bookstore.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, bookstores were indie bookstores were bouncing back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the last couple of years. I mean, this has probably changed that dramatically, but they were coming back because Borders is gone and Barnes and Noble is struggling. So all those big box bookstores are kind of going down the tubes. Good riddance.
Mm-hmm.
The indie stores were coming back. So that was great. And I always try to help the indie stores. So obviously, so where your bread is buttered. So
yeah. Do you have I mean, it seems like you have a disdain for superhero comics.
Disdain?
Is that from
superhero comics up there? I mean, I loved them when I was a kid.
Well, that's what I mean. Like now though, like the industry as it is now.
Yeah, I don't much like what I see right now. Do you?
Well, no. I see my thing with superhero comics that's always bothered me is that trying to be an alternative cartoonist in America meant that you basically had to go through years of humiliation because the only places to get your work seen were in their arena.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I have a resentment built up about the mainstream comics world because I never wanted to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. But just because I wanted to tell stories in little boxes, I had to sit there in their fucking playground where they treat you like shit, and they treat you like you're an amateur.
But this was back like in the early 2000s when I thought, all right, I'll give the superhero, conventions a try because I got invited to a couple. Mm-hmm. And one was Mid-Ohio Con, which is this big mainstream con in Columbus. And they put me right next to this guy. What was his name? Greg something. He's a pretty well-known cover artist, and he does like these cheesecakey covers with boobs everywhere that are based on photos, so they're like really super photorealistic.
Yeah.
I was there with my, crappy like minis and self-published stuff, and I think either the first Trash or the first My Friend Dahmer was out. And nobody is, there's like maybe one person an hour. And this guy has lines that are like 40 deep to buy these prints of these, these women with big tits. And Greg Horn, that's his name.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's like infamous for cheesecake.
Yeah.
Very popular with the superhero crowd. And then a security guard came by and said, you guys can't clog up the aisle. So they spread out sideways and they like totally obliterated my table with a line. And there was at one point when this guy had like this giant Slurpee.
No.
And he was like arching his head over to look at the prints, and he put it down on my books and like reached over to grab them. And I'm like, what the hell, man? Get that shit off my book. And he was actually offended that I made him move his giant Slurpee.
Oh yeah,
that was it. I packed up and left at the end of the day. It was like this. I'm not dealing with this anymore.
Yeah, it takes a while to figure that out. Like, hey, this isn't my scene.
Right.
Because you're just like, oh, there's a like comic fest. Oh, I'm gonna go check that out, and then you get a table.
Yeah. After that, I never went to any mainstream cons. I mean,
I did Wizard World Columbus. That was the last superhero show I did. And I was just like, never again. I'm not doing this. This sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I doing? Like, these people don't want what I'm doing. Like, why am I here? They're not interested. Why am I trying to force this? It's like,
I don't even think they're that interested in comics. Period. I mean, they just go there to
meet Ferrigno.
Right. To meet the purple Power Ranger or the chick who played zombie number 12 in Walking Dead.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's pretty awful.
But that seems like something that's happened in the past 10 years or something, like where it's shifted, like where the comic artists were no longer the stars and the main attraction, and it became really more of a pop culture convention than a comic convention.
I haven't gone to enough of them that I have any knowledge of when it happened. It seems like it's always been that way. Well, I like plugged into the Indie Fest pretty early. I mean, I think I was at the second or third SPX, and so I've always gone to those festivals because that's obviously where, and it's nice to see them build up, and they're getting bigger, and there's more of them, and they seem to be gaining in popularity. That's great.
Well, they were.
No, don't be.
I'm just kidding. I'm sure
everything it'll bounce back,
I mean, of course. Yeah, of course.
But short term, we're all fucked.
But when you first put out your first graphic novel, which is Punk Rock and Trailer Park?
Yep.
So, did you get vibed by the people at when you go to like an indie show? Did people act too cool for you because you were like an alternative comics or alternative newspaper cartoonist?
No, it was like I said, I'd gone to those shows before just as a weekly strip artist. I'd make like minis out of strips and sell them, and they always did pretty well, especially at SPX because my strip ran in the Baltimore paper and it ran in the DC paper, so I was known there. Mm-hmm. Or if I went to a fest in Chicago, it ran in the Reader. So I always tried to pick festivals where my strip was appearing, so at least people sort of knew who I was or recognized the work. And no, I was always, people always welcomed me. I mean, not as much as they do now, but I mean, I never had a problem with that. The problem is that I was surprised at how difficult it was to get somebody to publish my longer work. Because, I mean, I had people tell me, well, we're not taking chances on an unknown. I'm like, unknown? You know, I'm in the fucking Village Voice, man. I mean, what are you talking about? Unknown. But I was unknown in their world, you know.
Yeah.
So that surprised me. But I was always really well accepted at the uh, at the festivals by the fans, and I always sold up. Yeah, I usually sold out of my books, so that was nice.
So how come you don't draw short stories?
Well, I did. Um,
I mean, like submitting to like anthologies and things like that.
yeah, no, I'm always so busy working on books that I'm not as fast as you.
Well, there's a value to doing it though. It's good to like keep your work out there as
I
you're
know,
writing a book.
I know. But I mean, I went for 20 some years putting out new work every week.
Yeah.
So it's already been there, done that,
Are you still repackaging the Derf stories? Is what they're called, or what are they called? The ones that like Alternative is doing, the collections of
Oh,
the
true
script.
stories?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not in France, and it was a bestseller. They put
Really?
it out, they put out the whole book, and
Oh,
it went bonkers. It was so gratifying, because it's old work, and I'm always kind of uncomfortable with my old work, but I'm really fond of those. They're like little diary comics that I did for
yeah.
years. I mean, I from gosh, like late '80s maybe
Uh-huh.
through the end of the strip in the 2020 when my Friend Dahmer came out, so 2012, and they published the whole. I mean, it was like 250, 300. And they published some of my short stories too that I did as minis.
Is there
And
going to
so
be an English edition of that book?
what?
Are you going to put out an English edition of that book?
Probably not. I focused on new work. I mean, you get to a point where um, you don't have to publish all the time. I mean, it's nice actually.
Is it? I don't know because I make my living from volume, not from like I've never had like a giant hit. Like
Well, yeah, but you will. So,
great, but I don't, maybe when that happens I can chill out. But like for the foreseeable future, like I have a small enough audience that like if I keep giving them something new every year, I can make my living from doing that.
well, and you should.
Yeah.
Yeah, you should. I mean, you're at that point of your career where you're super prolific, one,
Mhm.
and I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you build an audience. So, I mean, I went through the same thing.
Yeah.
But then I got to a point where when you have, a couple big books, then you can kind of like, you know, I don't know. I mean, Dan Clowes doesn't put out books very often either, or
Yeah.
I think of somebody else. I guess Los Bros still do. They put out stuff all the time.
Yeah, they're
So,
making a short film based off one of my comics
well, that's awesome.
that's supposed to be like this guy wants to start with this. Is it from a comic I did called The Lizard Laughed? And he's making a short film based off of that. It's like part stop motion because there's like a weird like fantasy part of the story, and then the rest of it's live action. And then if that goes well when he like shows it at film festivals, then he'll try and do St. Cole next. So we'll see how
Yeah, that'd be great.
that
That'd be
works
great.
out.
Yeah, I've never had any interest in getting sucked into animation. People ask me that all the time,
Hmm.
how come you didn't animate it? It's like, well, because I didn't want to spend 5 years of my life working on a film.
Yeah,
That's why. I had
I
other books I wanted to do.
I get tests all the time for like Cartoon Network shows and things like that, but I've never I've never gotten any of the gigs. I got a test to work on BoJack Horseman. I got a test to work on like the regular show. I just did one a few months ago for one that was called Summer Camp Island.
These like writing tests, you mean?
Yeah, like they do like the storyboard test, but what they mean by storyboard is that you're basically writing it because it's just like they give you the outline. Like these two characters go out and do this.
Well,
Now
it's
draw
like
that.
Marvel method.
Yeah, you to then write this like make it funny and stuff. So
Right.
you sit down and try and make it funny. But my problem is that I'm not familiar. I don't watch cartoons. Like I don't watch like Cartoon Network stuff. So I'm not the best at writing that kind of stuff. So I never get hired. But
I know a lot of guys who've gone into. I mean, Kaz is doing SpongeBob, and Johnny Ryan is doing Bugs Bunnies, and it's
Sam
like
Henderson.
all these guys. Sam Henderson. I don't think he's doing it anymore, but he was.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think cartoonists are actually really good to hit up for that kind of stuff, because the job of like storyboarding really is just making comics.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and it's in money too. I mean, those guys are finally, they're finally making good money doing something. I mean, it's certainly a viable part of a comics career if you can get a gig like that. More power to you.
Well,
But like I said,
yeah, I'm not going to move to LA. That was another thing that always held me back. It's like, I'm like, oh, you want me to test for this? I'll test for it, but as long as like I'm working from home, I'm not moving to LA. But actually, LA money in South Carolina would go real far. So the daily guys look down on the alternative weekly cartoonists. For what reason?
They didn't think we were serious, I guess. I don't
know. That's really funny.
Yeah, there's always like that weird hire. I mean, this was a while ago, and I think a lot of those guys have died out or gotten their comeuppance. Or some of them have just gone bonkers, like Scott Adams or somebody like that.
Oh, God. That's crazy.
But I don't even know if they even have a thing. I guess the National Cartoonist Society is still churning along, so they must.
If they asked me to take over Gasoline Alley, I would take it. I would start.
You'd have to draw like this big, though.
I know that's what sucks, but
it's not like Frank King, where you had this broadsheet that was you could wallpaper your wall with.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a different ball game now. I mean, that's why all those guys quit, like Watterson and all those guys. They just couldn't. They bailed just in time.
Well, what do you think the pay is like at this point?
News strips, it's like slave work.
Oh, really?
Because it's a really brutal workload, and if you sell it to like 100 papers, you're like locked into a contract, but you're making a pittance off those 100 papers for all the work you're doing. So no, it's not a good deal at all.
My mom sent me like all my journals that were at her house, and one of them has your George Bush strip where he's just grabbing his crotch and gurring.
Oh yeah, shit, yeah. I remember that one.
Reason, yeah. Young Noah was like, and I clipped it out in the journal.
That was my audience right there. Teenage weirdos. That was.
I always had a problem with that when I was like a younger cartoonist. It's like if I had an opportunity, like I remember in Denver there was like this hipster magazine called like FM magazine, and they're like, you should do a comic for us. And I was like, yeah, all right, I'll do. I already had a disdain for them because I thought they were too hip. So I did this comic that made fun of like hipsters. Like for their magazine, it's like
well, that's okay. That's kind of a very Gen X thing to do. Make fun of make fun of hipsters. I mean, to quote Joe Strummer, it's an incredible thing to be in the right place at the right time with the right shit. And when I started the city, I was like 28 years old. And I'd been walking or wandering around trying to find my place. And suddenly, I found my voice. And I was right there when the old weeklies were taken off and I had a place to publish my stuff. And finally, I was doing these cartoons that I had in my head that I'd been struggling to get out. And it was an amazing experience,
Yeah.
First, I don't know, 7-8 years of that strip were just a total blast. I'm very grateful that I had that experience.
Yeah, and how cool was it? Because when I got into comics, I got in through like underground comics, even though that shit, it was so. I mean, I remember I was trying to be an artist, and this guy let me hang my drawings in his gallery. Like it wasn't even a gallery; it was like an old fish market in Denver called Denargo Market. It's like all gone now, but it's like office spaces. They just like let a bunch of like random people like rent out for cheap. So this guy turned it into like a studio, like a little gallery, and he let me hang up my drawings, and he was like, "Oh, your art looks a lot like a comic art. Like you like comics?" I was like, "Yeah, I like comics." He's like, you ever read Rebel Visions? And I was like, no, I don't know what that is. He's like, you don't know what Rebel Visions is? I was like, no. And he went into like his little room because he was like living in the gallery, and he brought it out, and it was like that Fantagraphics book, Rebel Visions. And he's like, here, take this. And I took it home and I read it. I mean, I like devoured that book. And so that's what I thought. That was kind of my gateway into alternative comics. Like I thought that like I felt like what I was reading was like about current comics. So like I thought that like Graphics had its own printing press and they were like printing their books because that's what the undergrounds did,
Right.
Like, that's how you became a publisher. Like some hippie would get a printing press and they start publishing stuff
in the basement. Yeah.
So I thought it was still like that. So printing, I started to like fetishize printing. Like there would be like I remember one in the book they had like a bunch of misprints of like the Zap covers where like the plates were off or whatever. And that I just got like really fascinated by that. Like, holy shit, look at this, they fucked it up and like that's so cool. So
that's that color separation shit we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So by the time I got into like publishing my strip in the newspaper, the fact that my drawings had gone through that same process that the underground comics had, I took the newspapers and I would take them to a photocopy machine and blow them up so that I could see my drawings in like these little dots,
Like dots, really?
Yeah. I got like so into that. I thought that was like the most beautiful thing. And then like I would like cut those photocopies up and like paste them in my sketchbook.
Huh. Wow. So did you start with did you do the mini thing too? I mean, you did the self-published minis, yeah.
Yeah. Then
how many of those did you do?
I probably did about 10. But what happened was with mini comics, I met this guy whose name was like Sean Flynn. He was like a poet in Denver. And he was publishing little poetry zines. And I met him on like MySpace because I had like a little MySpace for my comics, but I'd never actually published anything. And he wrote to me and he's like, hey, I'm going to publish like a little collection of your comics on your MySpace page. And I was like, oh, cool. So I sent him my comics and he printed up one copy of like this mini comic because he just kind of was like a burnout he had like no follow through. So I got the one copy of it and I took the staples out and I laid it out flat and I realized how I was like, I could just do this myself with my comics.
Right.
And that was how I learned how to just do it. And then I just started like mimicking that. I started drawing my own mini comics based on that. I just take it apart. And then I would just go around Denver and like leave them places. Like I wasn't trying to sell them.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Because like, none of the comic shops would have taken them anyways.
No, but like wherever, like because there was a lot of coffee shops and like little like hipster boutiques and stuff, and they always had like a little ledge where all the bands would put their flyers and things. So I would leave a stack of my mini comics.
Nice.
And one time I was living in this house. I was living in this apartment that was in this old Victorian house in Denver, and the apartment I had was like really crappy. And I made a comic about how shitty this apartment was, and I published it as a mini comic. And then I left them all over Denver. And when I fucking moved out, I went back to get my deposit back.
You don't fuck off, yeah.
She pulled the comic out and was like,
oh, nice.
She said, you did this comic? And I was like, oh, like all the blood just like drained from my face. Like, yeah, but I didn't need anything. I was just trying to be funny. And
oh, man. Yeah, we've all gotten in trouble by our comics before, to be sure.
Well, it was the same. I wasn't trying to be a mini comic artist. Like it was a means to an end. Like I wanted a publisher because I'm not a businessman at all. I'm terrible at that stuff. So I was just trying to get my name out there. That was the whole point of it. And I remember my mom lived in San Francisco at the time, actually right next to the Comics Experience. She had a house there.
Oh, nice.
And I would go out and visit her and stay in San Francisco. And so I went into the Comics Experience and there was a flyer there that said, like, send in 20 of your mini comics and get like 20 back from like different artists around the country. So I did that. Like I sent like 20 of my comics in and I got 20 comics from other artists like all over the country.
Oh, okay.
And that was great, man. I got to like meet a lot of people that way.
Well, yeah, a little network. Yeah, it was all about networking with the mini thing. I've always had this really great instinct about when to get the fuck out. And I bail like a year before I should, and then the whole thing turns to crap. And right around 2000, really, I thought, these alt weeklies are dead.
Wow, all the way back then.
Yeah, well, the internet had just, I mean, that's when Craigslist went national, like 99 or 2000, and social media was really cutting into the personals, and those were the two big money makers for alt weeklies.
Yeah.
And I just thought, yeah, this is not good.
Oh shit.
And the other thing was all the classifieds, those page after page after page of gray agate type. That's where they put the comics. And they were great because they just pop off the page, That's why all the weekly comics were like heavily inked. You get stuff like Charles Burns or, Doug Allen or some of these guys that were really putting a lot, Tony Millionaire. And it worked great. But once that agate goes away, they replaced them with phone sex ads.
Yeah.
So you got all these full color boobs and tits everywhere, and the comics just were completely obliterated. And then the ad guys said, why are we paying to run the stupid comic when we can run another 900 ad here? And that's when the comics went. So I saw that coming. I mean, I'm not really gloating about it because it was a bummer, but that's when I started moving into long form comics and had a plan to move into books.
So how do you? So I'm just gonna follow your lead then, because
man, we're with the same publisher.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm gonna be like, all right, it's time to get out of here. I remember one time Chris Ware told this story. He said that one time him, Chester Brown, and Seth were out to dinner, and they were just all talking about comics, and those guys are really, really intense. And the waitress came over and she said, "Excuse me, are you guys scientists?" Yeah, here's what I'm going to read.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I can't find the second issue. I got to track that one down.
I got it. Number 2 or number
number 2. I have number 1 and 3.
I got all of them, but they're not in order. Damn it! What did I do with them? I don't know. They're in here somewhere. I can't find it now, but I know I have them all. Yeah, Spain was a huge influence on me.
Yeah, that's another one that we lost. No.
Yeah. I got to know him. I never met him face to face, but we like messaged back and forth, and he knew who I was. I mean, he knew my work. I was really thrilled by that. And nice guy. What?
He was a big influence on you?
Oh God, yes. No. I first discovered Spain when I was like maybe 14 or so, 13. I think it was like the first underground comic that I got, because they're really hard to find because I grew up in a small town. So you had to mail order them like blind from Bud Plant or whoever. And with undergrounds, that's like a 1 in 50 chance that it'll be good. The rest will just be like some shitty porn comic. But I knew somehow, actually, the friend I was talking about who recently passed away, he knew Spain. He had somehow knew who Spain Rodriguez was and said, "Oh yeah, we got to get this." So we ordered a couple Spain comics, and just the subverse came, and I was like, "Oh,
wow."
Yeah. I think you look at my work, especially like punk rock and trailer parks, and it looks so much like Spain. I mean, it's just it's real heavy line work, the heavy blacks, and the kind of that expressionism, that punky expressionism. That's all Spain, as far as I'm concerned. Kind of shoved through a post-punk filter. I mean, a lot of people, mainly people that don't know anything about comics, they always say, "Well, yeah, he comes, he's influenced by Robert Crumb." I'm like, Crumb?
They always say that.
One, I can't draw that well, and 2, I mean, I've hardly read any Crumb comics. I mean, I really, I haven't read that many, but Spain was the one. So, yeah, I think he's fabulous. So that's a good read there. Do you have the big paperback? The big collected Trash Man?
I don't have it.
Oh, that's a good one to get.
I think Fantagraphics just started.
Newspaper strips too. That's where he started doing. Trash Man started as a newspaper strip.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the East Village Other, I think,
Hmm.
which the hippie paper in the Village, obviously. And they're great. And then there's another one, I think, called Mean Bitch Thrills. I got them both.
Yeah, see, when people talk about how you're so popular in France, the one thing that people can't figure out is like what attracts a French person to your style, because your style of drawing is so opposite from the kind of comics you see over there.
Yeah.
Do you think
I have absolutely no answer for you. It is as big a mystery to me as it is to.
are you influencing French cartoonists there? You see like anybody who's drawing like you?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't see enough that that I know. I mean, I know that I'm pretty well known there, but whether anybody's. I mean, you know, the nice thing about comics now is I think that influencers are flying both ways across the Atlantic. Like it used to be, I see when I look at like American comics, I see tons of European. It just looks all European to me now. Italian and Spanish and French. And I think that American comics and Canadian comics are going the other way as well. And you're seeing influence. It's this great cross pollination, which is something only that happened in the last 10 years or so, 10, 15 years. Because before that, I think most, you know, these comic scenes were pretty insular. You know, they just didn't get a lot of outside work. And now it's great. And I think it only makes comics better. And of course, the influence of manga and all the rest. And, you know, so you get, I see a lot of influences of a lot of people. But as far as me specifically, I don't know. I don't pay that much attention.
Have you ever seen this?
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's not very good, though. That's the problem.
No, they're terrible. Gold Keys are awful. The covers are really great, and then the insides are just dog shit. Yeah,
true.
And I would only buy Gold Keys off the rack when I was really desperate. You know, it was one of those weeks where I'd already cleaned out all the Marvels and the DCs, and already I worked through the Charltons, and now I'm down to the Gold Keys.
Yeah.
It's like, oh. I needed my fix, you know. I was like, all right, I'll get Dark Shadows or whatever and read that.
Dark Shadows. Shit, that is bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I know. It was really, or what was the other one? Dr. Solar and, you know, whatever else.
What about the Robot Fighter? What was that?
Oh, Magnus Robot Fighter. Those are actually not bad.
Yeah, those are good.
I think Russ Manning did some of those, as I recall. Yeah. I mean, they're okay. Never made a lot of sense, like this guy punching out robots, but it's like, what's that about?
Yeah. Why?
Right now, why not? You know, like, okay, sure.
Because it's cool.
Turok, Son of Stone, or whatever that stuff was.
Yeah, anything with dinosaurs in it.
Like, right.
Super into.
Oh, you were fascinated with dinosaurs?
Oh yeah.
Well, you could have gotten like the reboot, right? From
well,
had out Valiant or somebody in the 90s or the 2000s.
When I was a kid, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was coming out.
Oh yeah.
Mark Schultz, and that was like one of my favorite comics. It's fucking beautiful.
Yeah, we had a really great comic shop in Columbus called Monkey's Retreat.
Mm-hmm.
That had just all this crazy stuff. Yeah, it was really an eye opener. Raw and Weirdo and all that stuff. Punk magazine. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really started seeing these wild comics and thinking, oh man, I could do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Fool. It took a while to get to that point. Yeah. But, yeah. It's kind of hard to develop your own thing, but that was the impetus of it. So, you know, if you have a good comic shop, treasure it and support it. Keep it going.
Yeah. All right, but honestly, seriously, thanks for giving me your time. I appreciate it.